You have 5 seconds. Who hurt you? Asked the Mafia boss. By morning, his own brother was missing. I never thought I'd find safety in the eyes of a monster. That's what they called him, Min Sung-hoon, the infamous leader of the Jumgang family, the boogeyman of Seoul's underworld, the man whose name was whispered in fear across the city. And now he was staring at me, his dark eyes cutting through the dimly lit office of Club Azure as blood dripped from my split lip onto the imported marble floor. You have 5 seconds. Who hurt you? His voice wasn't what I expected. Not loud or threatening. It was quiet, controlled, infinitely more terrifying than if he'd shouted. I'd worked as the club's pianist for nearly a year, and in all that time, I'd only glimpsed him from a distance. A tall figure in impeccable suits who moved with predatory grace. Now he was 3 feet away, studying my face with an expression that made my stomach drop. 5 seconds. How could I possibly explain 3 years of slow destruction in 5 seconds? How could I explain that the first time it happened, I convinced myself it was an accident? That the second time, I believed the apologies and promises? That by the 20th time, I no longer recognized myself in the mirror? I fell, I whispered, the lie hanging in the air like smoke. Sung-hoon didn't blink, didn't move. The silence stretched until my heart hammered so hard I thought it might break through my chest. You fell, he repeated, his tone flat. You fell so hard you have fingerprints bruised into your neck. You fell so precisely that both eyes are swollen. You fell with such unfortunate aim that you have what looks like a boot print on your ribs. I said nothing. I could feel blood trickling down my chin, the metallic taste filling my mouth. My body was a catalog of pain, each breath sending shards of agony through my ribs. But it was the shame that hurt worse, the humiliation of standing there, broken and bloodied, in front of someone like him. He took one step closer, then another. He moved with the grace of a predator, and my survival instincts screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. I was in his world now, his building, his territory. Do you know who I am? He asked quietly. Yes, Mr. Min. Everyone knows who you are. The underground king of Seoul. The man who could make people disappear with a snap of his fingers. Then you understand that when someone is beaten bloody and left in my establishment's parking garage, it becomes my business. His eyes never left mine. You understand that when one of my employees is attacked on my property, it's a message, an insult. It wasn't, I started then stopped. My voice was shaking. Please, Mr. Min, I just need to clean up and go home. It won't happen again. You're right, it won't. He turned to one of the men standing behind him. I hadn't even noticed there were others in the room. Jae-wook, call Dr. Kim. Have him bring his kit. No. The word burst from me before I could stop it. No doctors, please. I can't afford. You're not paying. I can't be in debt to you. I can't. My voice broke. I was going to cry. And that was the last thing I could afford to do right now. The last thing I could let Tae-woo's family see. Sung-hoon tilted his head slightly, studying me with renewed interest. You're more afraid of owing me than you are of going back to whoever did this to you. It wasn't a question, but I found myself nodding anyway. Debt was just another kind of prison. I already knew how that story ended. Interesting. He gestured to a leather sofa against the far wall. Sit. My legs were shaking so badly I nearly collapsed onto the cushions. The moment I sat, the adrenaline that had been holding me together started to fade, and the full weight of the pain crashed over me. Sung-hoon crossed to a bar cart and poured 2 fingers of soju into a crystal glass. He brought it to me, pressing it into my trembling hands. Drink. I obeyed. The alcohol burned going down, but the warmth spread through my chest, dulling the worst of the pain. I took another sip, grateful for the momentary relief, for the liquid courage. I'm going to ask you one more time, Sung-hoon said, settling into the armchair across from me. And this time I want the truth. Who did this to you? I stared into the glass. I thought about my tiny apartment in Itaewon, the one room I could barely afford. I thought about my grandmother's medical bills, the endless stack that grew no matter how many hours I worked. I thought about the nursing home in Busan, where my Halmini didn't even recognize me anymore, but still needed round-the-clock care. I thought about Tae-woo's last words before his fist had connected with my stomach. You think you can leave? You think anyone else would want you? You're nothing without me. The words had cut deeper than the blows, because part of me believed them. 3 years of being told you're worthless eventually convinces you it might be true. If I tell you, I whispered, he'll kill me. If you don't tell me, Sung-hoon replied, his voice soft but edged with steel, I'll find out anyway, and when I do, I'll be much less inclined to handle this quietly. My laugh came out bitter and broken. You think this is about handling things quietly? You think there's a version of this where I walk away clean? My entire existence for the past 3 years had been about surviving until tomorrow. About enduring one more day, one more night. About calculating which was worse, the pain of staying or the fear of leaving. Look at me, Gina. I did. His dark eyes had softened slightly, though his expression remained unreadable. How did he know my name? I'd never spoken to him directly before tonight. I protect what's mine, he said. You work for me. That makes you mine to protect. Now tell me who did this, or I start making phone calls. And by morning, every man in this city who's ever looked at you wrong will be in a basement answering questions. The threat should have terrified me. Instead, something warm unfurled in my chest. When was the last time anyone had wanted to protect me? When was the last time someone had looked at my bruises with anger instead of indifference? When was the last time anyone had treated me like I mattered? Your brother, I said quietly. Min Tae-woo. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Sung-hoon's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Something dark and dangerous that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My brother, he repeated, each syllable precise, controlled. I didn't know when we met. He said his last name was Park. We dated for 6 months before I found out who he really was. And by then, my voice cracked. By then it was too late. He said if I tried to leave, he'd have my grandmother moved to a state facility. He said he'd make sure I lost my apartment, my job at the club. He said no one would believe me anyway because I was nobody and he was a min. The familiar feeling of helplessness washed over me. How many nights had I lain awake, planning escape routes that always led to dead ends? How many times had I packed a bag, only to unpack it when I remembered my grandmother's fragile state, her dependence on the care I could barely afford? Sung-hoon stood, walking to the window that overlooked the Seoul skyline. He stood there for a long moment, his hands clasped behind his back, his shoulders rigid with tension. How long? He asked, his voice deceptively calm. 3 years. 3 years of walking on eggshells. 3 years of learning which words would set him off, which expressions, which tones of voice. 3 years of becoming smaller and smaller until I barely recognized myself. And tonight, I swallowed hard, wincing at the pain in my throat. I told him I was leaving. I'd saved enough money for first and last month's rent on a new place. My grandmother's care is covered for the next 6 months through her insurance. I thought I could finally get out. My voice dropped to a whisper. I was wrong. Where is he now? I don't know. I gestured vaguely at my face. He left. Said he was going to his poker game in Gangnam. Said when I got done being dramatic, I should be at his apartment with dinner ready. Like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just spent an hour methodically teaching me a lesson about who was in control. Like my blood wasn't still on his knuckles. Sung-hoon pulled his phone from his pocket, typing rapidly. Within seconds, it buzzed with a response. He read it, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He's not at his poker game. My stomach twisted. He knew I'd come here. I work here. It's the only place I had to go. He thought I'd turn you away, Sung-hoon finished. He thought I'd side with blood over justice. Won't you? The question slipped out before I could stop it, bitter and afraid. Sung-hoon turned from the window, and the look in his eyes made my breath catch. There was fury there, yes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like regret. My grandfather built this family on loyalty, he said quietly. But he also built it on respect. Tae-woo has shown you none. He's used our name to terrorize you. He's beaten you on my property. He crossed back to where I sat, crouching down so we were eye level, a gesture that struck me with its unexpected humility. That ends tonight. A knock at the door interrupted us. An older man with silver hair entered, carrying a black medical bag. He took one look at me, and his expression shifted to professional concern. "Dr. Kim," Sung-hoon said, standing. "Make sure she's all right." "No hospital," I said quickly. "Please." Hospitals meant records, questions, police reports that would lead nowhere except back to Tae-woo, angrier than ever. Dr. Kim gave me a kind smile. "I have everything I need with me, my dear. We'll take care of you right here." He looked at Sung-hoon. "May I?" Sung-hoon nodded and stepped back, though I noticed he didn't leave the room. He returned to the window, phone in hand, typing rapidly. Dr. Kim worked gently, cleaning the blood from my face and examining my injuries with practiced efficiency. He asked me questions in a soft voice. "Where does it hurt? Can you breathe deeply? Any dizziness or nausea?" And I answered as best I could, trying not to flinch when his fingers probed the tender spots along my ribs, trying not to cry when he cleaned the cut above my eye. "2 cracked ribs," he finally announced. "Severe bruising to the face and torso, mild concussion. Nothing that won't heal, but you'll need rest." He looked at Sung-hoon. "She shouldn't be alone for the next 48 hours. "She won't be," Sung-hoon said without turning from the window. I opened my mouth to protest, but Dr. Kim was already wrapping my ribs with expert precision. The pressure helped, making it easier to breathe. He gave me pain medication and instructions for care, all of which Sung-hoon listened to with complete attention despite appearing focused on his phone. When Dr. Kim left, I tried to stand. My legs wobbled, and Sung-hoon was there instantly, his hand on my elbow, steadying me. "Easy. I should go," I said. "I've caused enough trouble." "You've caused no trouble at all." My brother, on the other hand, he guided me back to the sofa. "You're staying here tonight." "Mr. Min, I can't." "Sung-hoon," he corrected. "And you can. You will." His phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and a cold smile touched his lips. "Jae-wook just found Tae-woo. He's at his apartment on Gangnam-dero." My heart stopped. "What are you going to do?" "Have a conversation with my brother about respect. He'll deny it. He'll say I'm lying." Tae-woo was so good at lying. So convincing. So charming when he wanted to be. How many times had people looked between us? Him with his easy smile, me with my downcast eyes, and decided I must be the one at fault. Sung-hoon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm very good at knowing when someone's lying to me, Gina. And Tae-woo. He's disappointed me for the last time." There was something in his voice that sent a shiver down my spine. Not fear exactly, something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. "Why do you care?" I asked quietly. "I'm nobody. Just a pianist who was stupid enough to fall for the wrong man. Stupid enough to believe Tae-woo's lies. Stupid enough to think I could save him from his demons. Stupid enough to stay after the first time he hit me. After the first time he locked me in a room for hours. After the first time he made me beg for forgiveness for something I hadn't done." Sung-hoon turned to face me fully, and for the first time since I'd met him, his expression softened completely. "Do you know why I built Club Azure?" he asked. I shook my head. "My mother," he said. "She was a classical pianist, like you. When I was a child, before my grandfather brought us into the family business, she played at a club in Hongdae. One night, the owner put his hands on her. She told my grandfather, and he handled it. But afterward, he said to me, 'Sung-hoon, when you're in a position of power, you protect the people under you, always, because the moment you stop protecting them, you lose the right to lead them.'" He moved closer, crouching down in front of me again. "You work for me, Gina. That means you're under my protection, and I take that responsibility very seriously. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me. My brother hurt you, Sung-hoon said simply. That has consequences. His phone rang. He answered it, listening for a moment before his expression darkened. Bring him in, he said. No, not here. The warehouse in Incheon. And make sure he's presentable. He ended the call and looked at me. Tae-woo will be handled. I want you to stay in the bedroom through there. He gestured to a door on the far side of the room. Lock it. Don't come out until I come for you. Sung-hoon. Gina. His voice was firm. Trust me, please. And somehow, impossibly, I did. The bedroom was larger than my entire apartment, decorated in dark woods and cream linens. I locked the door as instructed and sank onto the bed, every muscle in my body screaming. The pain medication was starting to work, making everything feel slightly distant and fuzzy. I must have dozed off because I woke to the sound of Sung-hoon's voice, calm and measured, coming through the door. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent chills down my spine. Then silence. Long, horrible silence that stretched until my nerves were screaming. Finally, a soft knock at the door. Gina, it's safe. You can come out. I unlocked the door with shaking hands. Sung-hoon stood in the doorway, his shirt slightly rumpled but otherwise unmarked. Behind him, the penthouse looked normal. No signs of violence, no blood. Where is he? I whispered. Gone. Gone where? Sung-hoon's expression was unreadable. Somewhere he won't hurt you again. That's all you need to know. My knees went weak. Sung-hoon caught me, his arm steady and sure. Did you? Is he? He's alive, Sung-hoon said quietly. For now. But he's no longer welcome in Seoul. By morning, he'll be on a plane to our operations in Jeju Island. He'll stay there indefinitely. His dark eyes met mine. He won't be coming back, Gina. Ever. But he's your brother. The words sounded hollow even to me. How many times had I made excuses for Tae-woo? How many times had I told myself that family was family? That deep down he must love me? That if I just loved him enough, he'd change? Sung-hoon's jaw tightened. I told him he had a choice. Leave voluntarily and maintain some dignity, or I make it public while he's being exiled. He chose to leave quietly. My head was spinning. I don't understand. You barely know me. Why would you? Because it's the right thing to do, Sung-hoon said simply. Because every person deserves to feel safe. And because... He paused, something uncertain crossing his features. Because when I saw you bleeding in my club, something in me broke. The thought of anyone laying hands on you, treating you as if you were disposable. His voice dropped. I haven't felt protective rage like that in a very long time. I stared at him. This dangerous man with his tailored suit and cold eyes who had just exiled his own brother for me. This man who was looking at me now like I was something precious, something worth protecting. Not a burden, not a possession, not a thing to be used and discarded. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say you'll let me make sure you're safe. Say you'll let Jae-wook drive you to get your things from wherever you've been staying. Say you'll accept my help finding a new apartment in a building with actual security. He reached up slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. Say you'll play the piano for me once you've healed. Something just for me. My breath caught. You're asking me to play for you privately? I'm asking for a chance to show you that not all mints are monsters. A slight smile touched his lips. Though I understand if you'd rather not. You've certainly earned the right to never want to see this family again. I thought about the past 3 years. The fear, the isolation, the way Tae-woo had systematically cut me off from everyone who cared about me until I had no one left. The way he'd made me feel small and worthless and trapped. Then I looked at Sung-hoon, at the way he'd crouched down to speak to me at eye level. The way he'd believed me without question. The way he'd chosen justice over blood. Okay, I said softly. Sung-hoon's eyebrows rose slightly. Okay. Okay to all of it. The help with my things, the apartment, the... I felt heat rise in my cheeks. The private performance. The smile that spread across Sung-hoon's face transformed him. For just a moment, he didn't look like a mafia boss. He looked like a man who'd been given an unexpected gift. "Good," he said quietly. "That's good." We stood there for a long moment, neither moving. Then Sung-hoon cleared his throat. "You should rest. It's almost 3 o'clock in the morning, and Dr. Kim will have my head if you don't follow his instructions." I nodded, but I didn't want to move. Didn't want to break whatever fragile thing was forming between us. "Will you stay?" I asked, then immediately felt foolish. I mean, not in the bedroom, obviously, but I don't want to be alone. Sung-hoon's expression softened. "I'll be right outside the door. You have my word." And he was. When I finally climbed into the massive bed, still wearing the borrowed clothes Sung-hoon had given me, I could see the shadow of him settling into the armchair through the crack in the door I'd left open. The knowledge that he was there, standing guard, made it possible for me to close my eyes. I slept better than I had in 3 years. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of fresh coffee. For a moment, I was disoriented, not recognizing the room. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back, and I sat up too quickly. Pain flared through my ribs, making me gasp. "Easy." Sung-hoon was suddenly there, coffee cup in hand. "Dr. Kim said you'd be sore for a few days." I accepted the coffee gratefully. "What time is it?" "Almost noon. You needed the sleep." He settled into the chair beside the bed, his own cup in hand. He'd changed clothes, now wearing dark jeans and a black sweater that made his dark eyes even more striking. "How do you feel?" "Like I was hit by the KTX," I admitted. "But better than last night." "Good." Sung-hoon was quiet for a moment. "I had Jae-wook bring your things from your apartment. They're in the living room." I also took the liberty of having my real estate manager compile a list of available apartments in secure buildings. "Whenever you're ready to look, just say the word." I stared at him. "You did all that while I was sleeping?" "I'm an early riser." His lips quirked. "And I wanted to make sure everything was in place before you woke up. I didn't want you to feel trapped here." The consideration in that simple statement made my throat tight. After 3 years with Tae-woo, who used isolation as a weapon, who would hide my keys, check my phone, track my movements, the mere fact that Sung-hoon cared about my autonomy was staggering. "Thank you," I managed. "There's something else." Sung-hoon leaned forward, his expression serious. "Tae-woo signed papers this morning, official documents severing his ties to the family business and acknowledging his voluntary exile. He also signed over his apartment to you." I nearly dropped my coffee. "What?" "Consider it payment for 3 years of abuse," Sung-hoon said, his voice hard. "The apartment is worth about 2 billion won. You can sell it, keep it, do whatever you want with it. But it's yours now. Free and clear." "I can't accept." "You can and you will." Sung-hoon's tone left no room for argument. "Tae-woo owed you far more than an apartment. This is the least he can do to make amends." My mind was reeling. 2 billion won. Enough to pay for Halmiani's care for the rest of her life. Enough to finish my music degree. Enough to never worry about money again. Sung-hoon stood, setting his coffee down. "Jae-wook will handle the paperwork. You don't have to do anything but sign." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I'll give you some privacy to get dressed. There are clothes in the closet that should fit. Take your time." "Sung-hoon." He turned back. "Why are you being so kind to me?" He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching my face. "Because you deserve kindness," he said finally. "Because you survived 3 years of hell. And because you're still brave enough to ask for help when you needed it. And because," he hesitated, "because I think you might be the first genuinely good person I've met in a very long time." He left before I could respond, closing the door softly behind him. I sat there for a long time, holding my coffee, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. My life had been turned completely upside down. Tae-woo was gone. I had an apartment worth billions. And Min Sung-hoon, the most dangerous man in Seoul, was looking at me like I hung the moon. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely, utterly overwhelming. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur. I moved into Taewoo's, my apartment with help from Jae-wook, who turned out to be surprisingly funny for someone who looked like he could break a man in half. The apartment was beautiful but full of Taewoo's things, so I hired an estate sale company to clear it out. I kept nothing of his. With every possession of his that left, I felt like I could breathe a little easier. Like I was reclaiming not just the space but myself. Sung-hoon called every day. Sometimes it was just to check in, make sure I was healing. Other times we talked for hours. He told me about growing up in the family business, the pressure to be perfect, the weight of carrying a legacy he hadn't chosen. I told him about my grandmother, about the slow heartbreak of watching someone forget you piece by piece, about my dreams of finishing my music degree, of maybe teaching someday. She taught me to play, you know? I said one night, curled up on my couch with the phone pressed to my ear. My grandmother. She was a music teacher before the dementia. That explains your technique, Sung-hoon said. It's old school. Disciplined. I smiled, surprised he'd noticed. You know about classical piano? My mother made sure of it. Said no son of hers would grow up culturally illiterate, family business or not. She sounds fierce. She was. His voice softened. You would have liked her. He never pushed, never demanded, but he was always there. And slowly, carefully, I felt myself beginning to trust again. For weeks after that terrible night, I returned to Club Azure to play. My hands trembled slightly as I sat at the grand piano, but when my fingers touched the keys, everything else fell away. I played Chopin, Rachmaninoff, Yuruma, pouring all my pain and hope and confusion into the music. When I finished my set, I looked up to find Sung-hoon standing in the shadows, watching me with an expression that made my heart race. He came to my performances every night after that, always sitting in the same corner booth, always watching with the same intensity. One night, after the club had closed, I found myself playing just for him. The staff had gone home, the lights were dimmed, and it was just the two of us in the cavernous space. Play something Korean, he said quietly, coming to stand beside the piano. I nodded and began to play Erarang, the haunting melody filling the empty club. Sung-hoon closed his eyes, listening, and when I finished, he looked at me with something like wonder. My mother used to play that, he said. I haven't heard it since she died. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was beautiful. He hesitated. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? Not here. Somewhere else. Somewhere public. My breath caught. You're asking me on a date? I'm asking for a chance to know you outside of all this. He gestured around the club. Outside of what happened with Taewoo. I thought about it. About the past month. About the way Sung-hoon had never once made me feel indebted or trapped. The way he'd given me space and time and choices. Yes, I said softly. I'd like that. The smile that spread across his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. We had dinner at a small Hanok restaurant in Bukshan, tucked away from prying eyes. Sung-hoon wore casual clothes, dark jeans and a simple button-down, and looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about his favorite childhood memories, about the time his grandfather taught him to fish in the Han River. I told him about learning piano from my grandmother, about the first time I performed in public at age 7. It was the most normal I'd felt in years. After dinner, he walked me to my car, keeping a respectful distance between us. When we reached it, I turned to face him. Thank you, I said, for tonight, for everything. Sung-hoon's eyes were warm in the streetlight. Gina, he stopped, something uncertain in his expression. What is it? I want to see you again. Not at the club. Like this. My heart was hammering. I'd like that. He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. Good. As I drove home that night, I realized I was smiling. Actually smiling. The bruises had faded. My ribs were healing. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe again. The next 2 months were like a dream. Sung-hoon and I had dinner twice a week. Sometimes at restaurants, sometimes at my apartment where I cooked for him. We took walks along the Han River, visited art galleries, sat in cafes talking for hours. He never pushed for more, never made me feel rushed or pressured. He was patient, gentle, everything Taewoo had never been. And slowly, I found myself falling for him. For his unexpected sense of humor, for the way he listened when I spoke, for the fierce protectiveness that never felt possessive. One night, as we sat on my balcony watching the Seoul skyline, Sung-hoon took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And I want you to be completely honest with me." My stomach tightened with anxiety. "What is it? Are you still afraid of me?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who could order deaths with a phone call, who controlled half of Seoul's underworld, who had exiled his own brother without hesitation. "No," I said, surprised to find it was true. "I'm not afraid of you. But you know what I am, what I do." I nodded. "I know." "And it doesn't bother you?" I considered the question carefully. It should, but it doesn't. Maybe that makes me a bad person. Or maybe it just makes you practical. He squeezed my hand. "This world isn't black and white, Gina. Someone needs to maintain order in the shadows. And that someone is you? For now." His expression grew serious. "There's something I need to tell you." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "My grandfather is stepping down. The family has voted, and I'm taking over as head of the entire operation. Not just Seoul. Everything." I squeezed his hand. "That's huge. How do you feel?" "Terrified," he admitted. "It's everything I've been working toward, but it's also," he trailed off. "It's dangerous, Gina. More dangerous than what I've been doing. There will be threats, attempts on my life, people who want to use my weaknesses against me." I understood. We'd talked about his world enough that I knew what he was saying. "I understand." "No, you don't." Sung-hoon turned to face me fully. "Because you're my weakness, Gina. You're the one thing in this world that could bring me to my knees, and every enemy I have will figure that out eventually." I felt cold despite the warm evening. Are you breaking up with me?" "What? No." Sung-hoon looked horrified. "No, I'm asking you to marry me." My brain short-circuited. "You're what?" Sung-hoon reached into his pocket and pulled out a small jade box. He opened it, revealing a stunning jade ring set in platinum. Exactly what I would have chosen for myself. "I'm asking you to marry me," he repeated. "I know it's fast. I know this life is complicated and dangerous, but I also know that I love you. I know that you make me want to be better. And I know that facing this future without you is unthinkable." His voice softened. "Gina, will you marry me? Will you let me protect you and stand beside you and build something real with you?" My hands were shaking. Tears were streaming down my face. 6 months ago, I'd been trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. Now I was being offered a future I hadn't dared to dream about. "You love me," I whispered. "Desperately," Sung-hoon said. "I have since that first night. I just didn't want to scare you away by saying it." "I love you too," I whispered. "I think I have for months. I was just afraid to admit it." "So, is that a yes?" "Yes," I said. "Yes, of course, yes." Sung-hoon's smile was blinding. He pulled the ring from the box and slid it onto my finger, his hands surprisingly steady. Then he pulled me into his arms and kissed me, deep and possessive and full of promise. When we broke apart, I was laughing and crying at the same time. "There's more," Sung-hoon said. "I want to do this right. I want a traditional wedding, not some courthouse thing. I want your grandmother there. I want my family there. I want everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours." My throat was tight. "My grandmother doesn't remember me anymore." "She might not remember you," Sung-hoon said gently, "but she'll feel the love in that room. She'll see you happy. That matters." I threw my arms around his neck, and Sung-hoon held me close, rocking me gently. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he murmured against my hair. That's my promise to you. I know, I whispered back. I trust you. And I did completely. This man who'd avenged me when his own brother had hurt me, who'd given me safety and freedom and choices, who'd courted me patiently and shown me what real love looked like. We sat on that balcony until the sunrise, my head on Sung-hoon's shoulder, the jade ring on my finger catching the first rays of light. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was excited for it because I wasn't facing it alone. The wedding preparations became a whirlwind of activity. Sung-hoon insisted on a traditional ceremony, complete with all the rituals and customs. I found myself swept up in a world of hanbok designers, pyebeak ceremony preparations, and meetings with the most exclusive wedding planners in Seoul. Through it all, Sung-hoon was my anchor. When I became overwhelmed, he would find me, take my hand, and remind me why we were doing this. This isn't just for us, he said one evening, after I'd spent hours poring over guest lists and seating arrangements. This is a statement. This is me telling the world that you are my choice, my partner, my equal. That I chose you over blood ties and family expectations. I understood then. In Sung-hoon's world, symbols mattered. Messages mattered. This wedding wasn't just a ceremony. It was a declaration. 2 weeks before the wedding, I visited my grandmother at her nursing home in Busan. Sung-hoon came with me, sitting quietly as I introduced him to the frail woman who had once been my rock, my teacher, my whole world. Halmione, I said softly, taking her thin hand in mine. This is Sung-hoon. I'm going to marry him. She looked at him with cloudy eyes, no recognition in her face. But when Sung-hoon bowed deeply and addressed her with the formal honorifics, she smiled. It wasn't understanding, but it was something. She has your smile, Sung-hoon said later, as we drove back to Seoul. Even now, I can see it. I wiped away tears. Thank you for coming with me. She's your family, he said simply. That makes her my family too. The wedding took place 3 months after our engagement in a traditional hanok in Jeonju. I wore a modernized hanbok in deep crimson and gold, with intricate embroidery that had taken artisans weeks to complete. As I prepared in the bridal chamber, surrounded by female relatives I barely knew, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the frightened, diminished person I'd been 6 months ago. In her place stood someone straight-backed, clear-eyed, adorned in the colors of prosperity and joy. When I walked toward Sung-hoon in the courtyard, his face transformed. He looked at me with such naked adoration that I almost stumbled. How had I gotten here? How had my nightmare turned into this dream? My grandmother was there in a wheelchair, and though her eyes were confused, she smiled when she saw me in my traditional dress. That was enough. The ceremony was small but elegant, just family and close friends. Jae-wook stood as Sung-hoon's best man, and my cousin Soo-jin, who'd reappeared in my life once it was safe to do so, stood as my maid of honor. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, there was only supportive silence. When Sung-hoon slid the wedding band next to my jade engagement ring, his hand was steady and sure, and when the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Sung-hoon kissed me like I was the most precious thing in his world. Because I was. The reception was held at Club Azure, the place where my new life had truly begun. Sung-hoon had transformed the space. Thousands of white flowers, candles everywhere, music that made people want to dance and laugh and celebrate. During our first dance, Sung-hoon pulled me close and whispered in my ear, "No regrets." I looked up at him. This dangerous, complicated, surprisingly tender man who'd become my husband, who'd protected me, who'd chosen me over blood, who'd given me a life I'd never dreamed possible. "Not a single one," I whispered back. And as we swayed together, surrounded by people who loved us, I thought about that terrible night 6 months ago. The blood on marble floors, the fear and pain and desperation. I thought about how sometimes the worst moments of your life lead to the best ones. How sometimes you have to break completely before you can heal properly. I thought about second chances and new beginnings and the strange paths that lead us to where we're meant to be. But mostly, I just thought about Sung-hoon, about the future we'd build together, about love that protects instead of destroys, about finding safety in the most unexpected place. "I love you," I murmured against his chest. "I love you more," Sung-hoon replied, "and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." As for Tae-woo, he remained in Jeju, working in the family's overseas operations. I heard through Jae-wook that he'd asked about me once, in the early days after the wedding. Sung-hoon had personally called him and explained in very clear terms that I was no longer his concern, that I was protected, cherished, untouchable. Tae-woo never asked again. And me? I finished my music degree, started teaching piano to underprivileged children in a community center Sung-hoon helped me establish. I visited my grandmother every week, sitting by her bedside and telling her stories about my life. She rarely responded, but sometimes she'd smile, and I would pretend it was recognition instead of just a pleasant moment. I learned to navigate Sung-hoon's world, the danger and complexity of it all. I learned which questions not to ask and which loyalties mattered most. I learned when to be the gentle wife at home and when to be the steely-eyed partner at his side during business functions. I learned to recognize the subtle power plays, the hidden meanings, the veiled threats that were the language of his world. Some nights, I'd wake to find Sung-hoon's side of the bed empty, and I knew better than to ask where he'd gone or what he'd done. Those nights, I'd simply wait for him, and when he returned, sometimes with shadows in his eyes, I'd hold him and remind him that he was more than the darkness he sometimes had to embrace. "How can you still look at me like that?" he asked once, after a particularly brutal week dealing with a rival family's betrayal. "Knowing what I am? What I've done?" I took his face in my hands. "Because I see all of you, Sung-hoon. Not just what you do, but why you do it. Not just your actions, but your intentions. And if my intentions aren't always pure, then I'll remind you what you're fighting for, what's worth protecting." He pulled me against him, burying his face in my hair. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You asked me who hurt me," I said softly, "and then you made sure it never happened again." 1 year after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. When I told Sung-hoon, he went completely still, then dropped to his knees in front of me, pressing his ear to my still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby. Are you happy?" I asked, suddenly nervous. We hadn't discussed children, hadn't planned this. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." He stood, cupping my face in his hands. "Gina, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted. Family, a future, a reason to be better than I was raised to be." As my body changed, as our child grew inside me, Sung-hoon became even more protective. Security was doubled. I was never alone. Some might have found it stifling, but I understood. In his world, family was both strength and vulnerability. "I'll build a different world for our child," he promised one night, his hand splayed across my growing belly. "A legitimate one. One where they never have to make the choices I've made." "I know you will," I said, because I did know. If anyone could transform a legacy of darkness into something better, it was Sung-hoon. When our daughter was born, tiny and perfect with her father's intense eyes and my stubborn chin, I watched Sung-hoon transform again. This dangerous man, this feared leader, reduced to awestruck silence by 10 perfect fingers and toes. "Min Ha-eun," he whispered, naming her for both his mother and mine. "Our little blessing." And she was a blessing, a bridge, a new beginning. Because happiness, I discovered, wasn't about having a perfect life. It was about finding someone who made the imperfect parts bearable. Someone who stood beside you when things got hard. Someone who chose you every single day, no matter what. And every night, when Sung-hoon pulled me close and whispered that he loved me, I knew I'd made the right choice. I'd asked a dangerous man for help, and he'd given me his heart instead. 6 years ago, I stood bleeding in Club Azure, certain my life was over. 5 seconds later, I told the truth to a man I should have feared but didn't. And by morning, my abuser was gone, replaced by someone who saw my value, who cherished my strength, who would move heaven and earth to keep me safe. You have 5 seconds. Who hurt you? He had asked. And with those 7 words, my entire life changed.